Why in the hell in 2021 would we do something old school like preserve our own food? Well, that's what we're going to figure out today right here on the Backyard Gardens podcast. Hint, I got no clue.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Welcome to the Backyard Gardens podcast, where we talk about all things gardening and give the information out for you to be successful in your garden, whether it's your first or your last. We are your hosts, Ben, the backyard gardener, and
Batavia, the front yard gardener.
one in the country,
One in the city.
Now get ready as we dig deep into this wonderful world of gardening as we learn to grow and grow for change.
So, when did you fall in love with preserving your food?
Oh, man, you know what? I did not keep track of the years like I should. I would say 2014. Mm-hmm. That's when I started to crack the code on it. Damn, I feel old.
Yeah.
Podcast over.
I think that, I can't say for certain, but I think my curiosity around it probably began around 2016-ish. Is when I started to, become
really
curious
look
about
into it. And
I
wonder.
started to research it. Like, is it really possible?
Yeah. Can I do that?
Are people really doing this?
Yeah. So before we get started, if you want to know what we use to can, you can check the link below in our Amazon list that we have. It'll help support the podcast. And we have all the canning tools that we use, except for tin cans. So a good friend of mine, we were talking and he was like, you posted this thing about canning with the backyard gardener. And he was like, you were putting it in jars. What the hell? And I was like, well, that's canning. And he was like, no, I'm thinking of a tin can. I'm like, well, we don't have a factory at the house. So
my uncle, when I was talking to him last year about canning, and he's like, but you're putting them in jars. And so I gave up. Like, I was not going to have the fight. I said, it's some jars of food, basically. And so I know now I'll only ever speak to him in terms of jarring, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really stupid that we call it canning, but it is what it is, and we do what we do.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if anybody's ever put them in tin cans.
Like as a home preserver?
Home. I don't know if that's ever been a thing. So, I mean, I could probably do the right thing as a podcast host and Google it. So let's do it. Do people can in tin cans? Simple search.
And just
no.
The internet gives you a resounding no. I'm sure it's some safety concerns and equipment concerns.
Yeah, it's, how are you going to steal a can? Yeah. So whatever. So look, we have a listener question. Okay. I get this question a lot. I get this question from Batavia. I get this from everybody a lot. So the question is coming up as soon as I find it. Here we go. Why are my carrots all greens and there is no carrot?
I've never asked you this question a day in my garden life.
Yeah, you have. We have record of it.
Prove it. Leonard,
roll the tape. So, do you want to know the answer?
Of course we do. We all do.
Okay. So, and it was no bottoms is how it was worded. So, there's a couple reasons, and since you're asking right now, in this very moment, is because it's too hot. And they are trying to grow their tops so they can go to seed, because what is the one thing that all of our food is put on this planet, its main purpose? What is it?
To reproduce.
That's right.
I used to have a boss that would ask leading questions like that, and he would just continue to ask and ask. You're on the fifth wrong answer, and he just continued to ask again. And so I'm glad I got that one right.
Well, it's from when I teach and stuff like that. I got feedback one time, and they're like, "There's just no active participation in the class," and I'm like, "Well, how am I supposed to do that? Like, I'm just lecturing." They're like, "Ask leading questions," and I was like, "For real?" So that's where that comes from.
Yeah, I definitely don't do that in any of the many training sessions that I've done. But that's the part about having different styles. How about that?
That's right. That's right. Hey, look, that's just what I was instructed to do. So the other reason could be too much nitrogen. Okay, you've overfed with too much nitrogen, so it's just producing green tops. And the last one is overcrowding. So that will a lot of times will go into small carrots, like teeny weeny carrots. But generally, when you have that, you also have small greens because they're competing for space
and nutrition.
So, yep, and nutrition. So, and I mean, thinning. You can. I mean, like I went out the other day and it's like, oh, I missed a couple, so I was thinning. And they're going to be ready soon, but I can just leave them in the ground.
Yeah.
So, but generally, it's heat. So, how do we cool it down? You can spray it with water in the middle of the day. It's called wetting down. You can provide some shade. For instance, I planted mine in front of my cucumbers. So my cucumbers shade them from the morning sun, and then my tomatoes shade them from the afternoon sun. So that is a thing. And that's really all you can do to cool it down, unless you move. Or do like Batavia and plant them in pots.
I have some carrots growing in pots in my garage under grow lights. We're going to see how that works out.
Yeah, I'm about to do my second planting.
They're slow. It still may be too hot in the garage, given that we're in summer.
Carrots are slow as hell.
Yeah.
They're a 100-day crop, easy. So don't fret about that. And I was talking to some people on Instagram the other day about carrots, and everybody resounding was like, it's 100 days. It's, for sure 100 days. Yeah. So, and I agree. So it's not 60 days, I can tell you that. And they're finicky as hell to get to germinate too. But once they do, boy, it's like...
Either you have like no carrots or you have all of the carrots. It seems.
Papa Bear just got a big carrot harvest, so I'm pretty happy about that.
And I'm not going to give this as a recipe, but I have yet to try it. But I've heard great reviews on carrot top pesto. So using the greens for the from the carrots as pesto. Did we talk about this before here?
We may have. I know Bridget from San Diego Seed Company has stated that her favorite smell in the world is carrot tops.
Interesting.
Yeah, which I found interesting. I have since gone out almost daily and sniffed my carrot tops. And I'm not picking up what she's putting down, but that's okay. I'm not, So, but no, it's, and by the way, the carrots are fantastic compost material, carrot tops.
Yeah.
But if I can eat it, I might do that. So would you eat it in place of the basil?
Oh yeah, you're swapping out.
Whose recipe is it today?
It's my recipe, but I don't have that recipe to give.
Well, you just basically just gave it.
Well, okay, here it is. Fast forward to the end of the show. You swap out you swap out the basil, and then you place carrot tops in there. I imagine you can do some half and half, or you can mix. Mix them.
Basil's a big part of it. That flavor is a big part.
I actually saw another gardener do onion basil, the green onion. Let me make sure I'm clear with that. So the green onion, so your onion tops or whatever, she did green onion basil and said that it was delicious. I don't have enough of them to do that, but
fascinating.
Did I say green onion basil? Green onion pesto is what I meant.
Pesto, yeah. I know what you meant. I was in your head, but so yeah, too hot, too crowded, too much nitrogen. Use a well-balanced fertilizer, and if you've been using blood meal, hold back on it, or alfalfa meal or feather meal, whichever it is that you decide to use.
And depending on your location, it just may not be. This is what I've run into before. It's just I tried to plant carrots in the hottest point of the year, so I had germination issues to begin with. So I never got off the ground with them. So keep that in mind.
Take your carrots, put them in the ground, and then cover them with a cardboard box or a piece of wood after you've watered them, and don't lift it up except for to water until they start to germinate, and then you will have carrots, because The whole thing behind them is, first of all, they don't like to germinate when it's really hot. But by adding that to them and watering it, you're cooling down the soil to give them a start, and you're keeping it evenly moist. So there you go. And on that note, we're going on to the episode. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back. A lot of y'all asked, how can you help support the Backyard Gardens podcast? Well, we have been busy, and we have created a t-shirt line just for the gardener.
To visit our shop, go to the link in the show notes and check out the t-shirts and other goodies we have.
Now, these are super special t-shirts designed just for the gardener, so enjoy. Thank you for supporting the Backyard Gardens podcast, and we'll see you guys after the harvest.
There's always an opportunity. Speaking of, do you preserve any of your carrots?
Amen, sister. I do. I jar them.
The like 2 seconds of confusion, then like, I got it. Yeah. It's not going to be a thing. We are not going to do it. Nope.
I am.
Nope.
And you know what? This is a partnership, a friendship, and we're going to both do it.
I just said to myself, and I wasn't going to say it out loud, I'm speaking for the podcast. So I'm now saying it out loud. Reject it.
But I'm an ass. I have to do it. But no, I do. I did last year, but funny enough, I didn't even eat them. I never got around to eating them. Because, frankly, canned carrots, see there, they were never my favorite growing up, but I think I had a lot that were going to go bad, so I decided to can them. Yeah, I think the texture of them is what I'm kind of like, I mean, I imagine you can just throw them in some soup or stews or whatever. I would take my carrots that are canned and put them on a baking sheet, toss them with some cinnamon, and then roast them. And I think that would be delightful. Okay. Let me know how that turns out. I will. So, why do you can? Or preserve, dry, freeze. This is not all about canning. Yeah, fermenting. So, we say can a lot, but we don't necessarily mean canning only. So we need to change that to preserving. So why do you preserve? Because I have a great interest in growing a lot of food in my garden, and it's just too much at this stage, and it's an absolute blessing. It's too much though for me to consume fresh, so it's a way for me to extend my garden season, to continue to enjoy all the greatness that comes from my garden, and then also it's a part of my preparation for the zombie apocalypse, like kind of the years later. Once we get past, majority of zombies are killed and we're trying to reestablish society. So, or the worldwide pandemic. Oh shit. We just went through that. Or inflation going through it right now. Or the drought that is hitting the West Coast, which I believe is going to severely affect our food chain next year, based on what I've read. So, kudos for you for being prepared. I would replace or with and for all of those. No, in all seriousness, I come from a long line of truly canned food, right? So, preserving, well, I wouldn't call it preserving. So purchasing food, making bulk grocery store runs, keeping food in the freezer, keeping food on the shelves, right? So it's, some of the vegetables obviously were fresh, but I mean, the majority of vegetables I would say growing up were out of the freezer or from a can, right? And so it's a way of eating, of consumption for me, right? And so let's not, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say the idea that I can do that with something that I have grown in a lot of cases from seed to preserving. I mean, it's a place I would like to be, like, on a grander scale going forward. Right. Yeah. So, what I was going to say, because I got excited when I thought of it, was let's not trip. If you go to the grocery store and you buy a pack of chicken for, on sale for $1.50 and you come home and freeze it, you're preserving food. And you're doing it in the exact manner that I think, it saves money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you have that put away. So it doesn't necessarily, obviously being this platform, and if you're listening to this, we're more than, talking about growing in the garden, but preserving food is a whole, just like you said, stocking up at the grocery store. I do it because I want to preserve the happiness of the garden season throughout the year so I can enjoy it all winter. But
I don't even,
Don't
when's
look
the
at me that
last
way.
time that I had a good cry on an episode here?
I don't know. But it's, and it seriously is, and we've talked about that before, that's a big part of it is in the middle of winter when you crack that can open, you know that you grew that and you preserved it.
Yeah.
And that's a feeling that you can't, and let me backtrack. Or you open the freezer and pull it out, or you bust out something dried.
Yeah.
That's something that you can't put a price on. You know what I mean? So you can blot your eyes if you want. You can't.
Yeah.
I see you sucking it back.
I had for my work, I had a presentation we were preparing for, and we did a dry run. And so I did kind of full hair pinned up, lip gloss, eyeliner. And so I didn't wash any of that off. So now I'm just like, thank goodness I didn't put on mascara. I take great pride in my garden, right? As I know you do, and as many of our listeners do. And I take great pride in the food that comes out of my garden, right? And so,
I'm not proud of my garden.
Okay, I'll speak for myself and all of the rest of the listeners. So I also, but that's it comes to a lull at some point, right? When the garden is asleep in the winter. And so over this last 3 years, when I've been able to go to a cabinet and pull out a jar of something, pull out a plastic bag of okra from the freezer, like, that pride in my garden and what I've been able to accomplish through growing is right back there with me. And then we haven't even got to the point of the goodness, right? So to enjoy, like, the food is really good too. I think that I didn't start preserving with that intention. That's been the bonus of it.
It's funny too, like, the way that you've steered this conversation from the beginning. You mentioned the zombie apocalypse, and that's what a lot of people say that jokingly. And, I get where people are coming from. And a lot of people, hold on, let me think about it. It's, I call it Tadowski, is what a lot of people call the end of the world as we know it. Okay, which we've gone through a certain phase of that because we're not the same as we were 2 years ago. And like I had, kind of listed off all these things, and that's exactly why I started a can. And now, like I've said before, like I was all like, I wasn't like freaked out like, oh shit, 2012's coming, it's the end of the world. But I was in the camp of like something different is happening and life is getting more difficult. Yeah. Because if you remember from the beginning, I said I started canning in what year? 2014. Well after 2012. So, like I said, I wasn't like, well, if I don't do it now, I'm not going to make it. But it's kind of been part of the process. And afterwards, like now it's just like, hey, I want nutritious food for my family. Yeah. So like my son, the first thing he ever ate was a green bean out of my garden. And he only ate the food that we grew for the first year. We would grind them up and we would cook them down and grind them up and puree it. And that's what he lived off of. His first sweet potatoes we ate, his first carrots, his first green beans, all that stuff we grew. So that's a testament to how we felt about our food system and how we cherish the temple that is my son and our bodies, about the food we put into it. And by doing that, we can control it. You know what I mean? And we can, he knows what good, now don't get me wrong, the boy loves a Snickers bar and he loves a slice of pizza.
As do I, yeah.
But he also knows the value of good food at 7 years old.
Yeah.
And he's known it. So, I told him the other day, Everybody was kind of bitching about the green beans being stringy. And I was like, fine, I won't grow any more food anymore. I mean, you would have thought that I told him that Santa Claus killed the Easter Bunny. He was on the ground crying. I was like, I'm joking, dude. Yeah, let's go out and pick some beans,
Yeah.
So it's just ingrained in a part of that life, and it's, T-shirts coming along with the other ones down below. Gardening is a lifestyle. It's not a hobby, and it can be whatever you want. So
just housekeeping item. We've mentioned this before, but it's worth saying again. Ben and I, we meet and we talk about topics, right? Episode topics. But the conversation is organic. So what you hear is like I'm hearing what he's saying for the first time in an episode as he's hearing what I'm saying for the first time. And I kind of feel like he's pulling a string. He saw the eyeliner running. And then he folds in the dialogue around, the first thing my child ever ate was from the garden. And I'm just leaning in and leaning over, and he just continues to go in for it harder and harder. I mean, we did talk about this and gardening being revolutionary, right? Remember I mentioned this to you the other day, and
I remember clearly.
Yeah, and I don't normally speak in those kind of, grandiose terms, but I do truly feel like that, right? And so I joke about the, zombie apocalypse. I'm fascinated with the concept of what happens when our world as we know it changes. Fascinated with the concept. Fascinated with the idea that, and obviously I'm fascinated with it because I believe that we may get there, right? So maybe not with zombies, but somewhere between where we are now and there. And I think gardening is a life skill, right? And so I learned to swim as an adult. I don't know, maybe I was like 32, 33 or something. And I firmly believe that swimming is a life skill.
For that shirt you got on right there?
Yeah, absolutely. Chicago Triathlon, one of my favorite shirts. I firmly believe it's a life skill. And I was gardening long before that. I don't know which year this shirt is. It's probably like the 2014 model or whatever.
Don't look at the arms of it to tell you.
Sometimes they put them on the arms. But
I thought you were like, how tight is it? Oh, this is what year it was.
This is actually, it's one of my favorite shirts because it has Chicago on it, but it also has a lot of give. It's grown with me. Let's just say that. But no, in all seriousness, it took me years to get to this concept when it comes to gardening, right? So my first garden was in 2008, and my view of it has really morphed over the years. I'm really happy with the way I look at it and the way that I pour into it now. And I've really, again, come to the conclusion that part of my preparation for when the world changes is to be able to provide one of the primary things we need to survive. Right. And so I'm just doing it one more vegetable every year, one vegetable at a time, expanding my knowledge, expanding my ability as a gardener. So I'm going to pause there and take a breath and take a drink of water.
Well, let's think about this. Don't take that drink yet.
And mute myself so I can blow my nose because I'm getting kind of sniffy and snotty.
Well, hold on. Don't do that just yet, because I want to ask you, now that the world has changed, how did that serve you last year?
So,
I mean, did you have to go to the grocery store as much?
So the grocery store was one of my few outlets when it came to like seeing real people. So I think I did it out of comfort and habit, but no, I've mentioned this before. I didn't have to go as often. My great aunt said, you probably buy too much food, just generally as a general statement in a conversation we're having. And I think about that often. And it's comfort, so I fortunately was never in a position, as far as I can remember as a child, where kind of, food insecurities were a thing for me, right? That's a lot of people's story. That wasn't mine. But kind of the making sure you have what you need when you need it was something that was ingrained. Going back to deep freezers, going back to, growing up with, a cabinet upstairs and downstairs of canned foods, right? And so that's really important to me. And even before, when I moved into this house in 2007, right, I basically had not quite a year before I started gardening. Now, my harvests back then were way different than now, but I said that to say I have continually wanted to make sure that I'm able to provide for myself, and if push comes to shove, my family, right? And so last year, going back to your question, there was great comfort in knowing in March, April, when I started sowing seeds indoors, when we were in the thick of all that was going on with the coronavirus, that shit, at that time, we didn't know what the hell was going to happen. That I had a yard full of food. I would have a yard full of food, you know.
And then fast forward to January of this year when it was total shit and you had just had your collard harvest in December. You had plenty of canned food. And so if it came to push or shove, that food that you had preserved would help push you through that season and extend time. So like that was a big thing for us is like, well, you know, there was food shortages. Okay. And it's not the first time in my life I've been through a food shortage. You know, when we had Hurricane Florence, we didn't have any food anywhere around here for 3 weeks. So you couldn't even go buy food. And my ass was eating fucking sweet potatoes that had been harvested 3 days before, and we were farting up a storm, boy. But that's all we had because everything had rotted in our house as well.
Yeah. That's actually really huge. So we're probably closer to some, you know, act of nature creating, you know, these spots within our country where access is not available. I mean, we've seen it every year. Storm season comes in, you know, so while that isn't at this point my experience in Chicago, we did get some tornadoes around here, but that's not my experience in Chicago. That still speaks to the ability of you're still able to provide for your family, you know? Right.
And the thing is when everything was going down and it was hitting hard and there was food shortages in the COVID pandemic, like our whole stance was like, look, we're going to make our food last so the people that can't grow food and the elderly people can get in there and get what they want. Now, that's a romantic thought because I know the truth is that people were not doing that. Other people weren't. But we had made it a choice on ourselves to make it easier for people.
Yeah.
And to clear the air, I am not trying to pull a string. So my whole thing is, you know, I'm very passionate about preserving food. And I know I joke around on Instagram and stuff like that. And, you know, I'm the big bald-headed, tattooed, bearded guy, you know, and all that stuff. But when it comes to that, like, I'm very passionate about it. It's got a big piece of my heart because, like I've stated, like, we raised our son on it and we did all these other things and it's pulled us through certain periods of our lives, certain trials and tribulations that we've had. It's made that more comfortable for us. And you can't put a price on that. And it's the whole reason I wanted to start a podcast and start gardening stuff for people to enjoy is to help people get a piece of that feeling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, you know, I know that it's like the other day, Miss Gardner and I did Cannon with the Backyard Gardener, right? You remember I did the one about the salsa?
Yeah.
You know, hold on, my light went out. I can't be sitting here in a straight up dark. It's kind of weird. But, you know, it's funny because I look at the amount of views it got and, you know, then you go back and like nobody says anything. People be watching, but they don't speak. And that's because people, it's intimidating for people. You know, when I'm talking about busting out the pressure canner, you know, people are thinking that it's going to blow up. You know what I mean? And that's just not the case. You know, you got to be really bad and have like, you have to be really bad and you have to be really neglectful for something to blow up on you like that, you know? So I know that people are very interested in canning, but I know that a lot of people do not, you know, can. Now, I know there's a lot of people that freeze and there's a lot of people that dry, you know? And when it comes to drying, I mostly like herbs and stuff like that, you know, amongst other things. But, you know, my whole goal was to like demystify this. And so, you know, and I want that passion to come into people's hearts because, you know, you've been experiencing it and I've enjoyed watching you go through the learning process and our conversations with you and unlocking that portion of your garden. I mean, you literally unlock a whole nother portion of your garden.
Absolutely.
It's like a secret door that you find and then you kick that door open. You're like, I'm here, bitches, and I'm fixing to make some food. You know, and it's like I said, if you look at a garden from a financial perspective, once you put something in the can, ching, 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 it just goes right up. You know what I mean? Like you make a jar of pickles. It's $4 a jar of pickles. Boom.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
I think that preserving, if I go back to what the initial inclination around it was to not be wasteful.
yeah.
Right. So you look and say, even if I have one single cucumber plant, that cucumber plant puts on a shit ton of cucumbers. Right.
Yeah.
You know, and so I first started harvesting cucumbers, and I'm eating like 2 cucumbers. They're actually pickling cucumbers because that's what's come up first. I'm eating like 2 a day. And at some point, that's going to be like, I'm over cucumbers, right? And so then you fold in the idea of like, I just don't want to grow pickling cucumbers. I want to grow a second type of cucumber. And so a part of it, and it had been years that I didn't grow more or different things because I just knew I couldn't consume it all, right? You know, there is of course I could have given a lot of it away. But I really wanted to be able to enjoy it beyond, you know, and so once either I was eating it fresh or not growing it at all, once I started to say, okay, people are doing this, that means I can do it as well. So that's part of what I want to give to people. If I can do this thing, you know, there are a lot of special things about me, but canning or preserving or freezing or drying, like that's not one of them. Like there's nothing that makes me special in my ability to do those things other than maybe patience. Right. Yeah. Curiosity, maybe those 2 things, but so many of those other people that are listening have those traits too. So it absolutely does make me happy as a part of my gardening experience. It brings me some comfort, you know, just as a regular old human being, knowing that I have one more ability to provide for myself. Now, sure, in the apocalypse, are we going to have the ability to put things in a water bath canner? No, but, you know, we'll figure that out later.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. I can tell you exactly how to do it, too. I've studied it, but it is definitely possible to, you know, do that kind of stuff. And I mean, you have to think like people have been doing it for hundreds of years.
Yeah,
if you didn't preserve food back in the day, you did not live. You know, and it's like gardening now is considered a life skill. Back then it was mandatory. If you didn't garden, you didn't, you know, it was kind of one of those, and I think back then it was called farming, but it's a little bit different, you know. But
so my goal number 1 is to be able to secure seeds, which there's a whole different dialogue we can go when it comes to that. Being able, you know, kind of when the shit hits the fan and we're looking at, is this the apocalypse? Is this happening? Be able to secure seeds. Yeah. I'm not going to be securing ball canning jars. So we'll figure that piece out again later.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is, I mean, it's all about stocking up, but you know, and that's part of it. So like my goal, and I battle with this a lot, is, you know, I want to be, you know, as much of a homesteading place as I can. So, you know, what does that mean? That means that I want to get as much of my food and be as self-sufficient as possible off of my land. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Now, am I a homesteader? Hell, I don't know. And I don't care. You know, am I a gardener? Yeah, I'm a gardener because I got a garden, you know, but that's kind of where I'm at with it, is like, I don't want to be fully dependent on Billy Bob, farmer down the road, who's spraying with harsh chemicals just to spray with harsh chemicals so he can make a buck. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I'm not into that. Yeah. You know, I'm into, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like if I have to, I will spray something that is not organic on my crops if it comes down to it. But, you know, I haven't done that in years. And if you do it once or twice, it's different than it, you know, first of all, being baked into the seed so that it's resistant to this chemical that you're then going to eat, and then just constantly spraying, you know, every 10 days or something just for maintenance. So, yeah, I mean, preserving food, we haven't even scratched the surface of the idea of the health benefits, right? So I think that there is some assumption when we talk about health benefits associated with gardening, growing your own food, obviously that you're expanding that,
right? So it's not like, between, April and October, boy, you're eating good. Look at all of the nutrition. Look, you're eating the rainbow. And then it's like, here comes December. What are you going to do, right? You're still able to, as you describe it, supplement your diet with healthy and nutritious food that where it came from, right? It's not to say that food that you buy in other places isn't nutritious. It doesn't, facilitate a healthy diet. I'm not saying that, but you know what you know, right? There's this saying, folks are like, I just don't eat from everyone's kitchen. I don't eat at everyone's house. I don't eat everything that everyone makes, right? There's a reason for it, right? You don't know what goes on in their home and their kitchen and so on. Think about your everyday food the same way. You don't know what happened before it got to that grocery store, right? And so a part of your garden can help ease some of that concern if you're eating from your garden.
Well, and I mean, think about this too, is like, we were talking about the intro to the show and Batavia was like, whatever you do not get rid of the old timey stuff. And there's the reason why that's in there is because if you think about back in the day, and I keep going back there because, I firmly believe that at some point we will be back into that period of time somehow, either by choice or by necessity. People, if you didn't can and spend the whole summer canning, growing and canning and preserving, you didn't eat. So like your cabinet was nothing but jarred foods and Ma was in there, preserving, and Pa was out there hunting and feeding the hogs. You know what I mean? And that's how it went down. And so like, if you think about that, like we as a nation and as really a planet are blessed that in the summertime we can go to the beach and we can play. Yeah. Because back then you couldn't play, it was no joke because you don't want February to come around and not have anything to eat.
And babies are literally
imagine
hungry.
in your house, like you can't see anything but snow. What, you gonna eat snow? And I mean, what are you going to hunt in Chicago?
Plenty of squirrels and
well, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, squirrel is good.
I have no interest in hunting or consuming either, just for those that are listening and keeping track. And I think that I like the balance of the episode. I hope that it's balanced, and we don't preserve only for doomsday, right? We talked about some of the positive pieces with just gardening and preserving your food, but let's not confuse matters. A part of the reason why Ben and I garden, a part of the reason is for between now and doomsday. It absolutely is, because there could be a day. Heck, I went to Walmart, this is 2 weeks ago, literally no beef on the shelves, like no beef in the frozen food section. Right. And I don't know the reason why, but just know that it wasn't there. Right. Now, I wasn't going there to buy beef, but that's not the point. If that's not a signal of something, I don't know what is.
So I was reading about that. And from what I understand, the drought in the West Coast is causing stress on the animals, and they can't buy hay, and the hay prices are so high they can't afford to feed them. So from what I understand, they've had to slaughter a lot of the cows early or sell them off. So, and then the other thing too is stuff like almonds, because almonds are so water hungry that they're cutting those back. And then this year, a lot of the farmers had to just let some of their land go. And next year is probably going to be more. So you're going to see more and more of this happen until this drought lets up. And there's nothing anybody can do about that unless you subscribe to the whole HARP thing. And I'm not going to get into that. I don't have my tinfoil hat on. It's been a while. If you want to look it up, you can. It's called HARRP. And you can go down a rabbit hole on that. And you can have a conversation somewhere else. But I'll steer you in that direction. And I don't subscribe to it, but that's a whole thing where like, that's what we're seeing. And, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and this is something that really needs to be addressed on its own separate episode, and it will be. Somebody started gardening in the beginning of the pandemic, and they said, I'm sick and tired of people saying it's easy to garden because it's not.
Come on, somebody. Come on.
And so while you and I sit here and we're like, it's not that hard. All you got to do is dig a hole, stick it in the ground and take care of it. While that is true, part of the problem is you don't wait until you got to start a garden. It's like you said, it's a life skill. And you start, so when you need it, you got it. And if not, like, dude, I enjoy my garden. Like, I don't ever think about my garden anytime and be like, when that apocalypse happens, I'm fixing to be good. Like, I don't ever think about that.
Yeah. I mean, just again, for the record, because, I mean, there's, I guess, a log that we're keeping with records. And I like the whole dark background. Let's roll with it. Like, dim those lights, brother. In all honesty, an apocalypse like anything we've seen, any portion of what we've seen in the movies and TV shows, my front yard garden is going to be exposed. That thing is only going to last for so long, right? My cousin told me once, you need to be figuring out how to protect that food that you're growing, right? So there's that. I still firmly believe it's a lifestyle. I struggle. There's an internal battle when it comes to the dig a hole, put a seed in, and then some of the troubles that we all have, right? We're right at the point where places are getting super hot. It's getting humid. Bugs are eating up people's crops, mine included, right? Like, that shit ain't easy. You know what I'm saying? Like, but it's worth it. Every bit of it.
It is. And it's part of, it's connecting with nature and it's connecting with the planet. And then preserving it just takes it one step farther, And I mean, there's an argument of like, well, where you live, like, especially you, like, maybe you shouldn't live there because it's not hospitable in the wintertime. But at the same time, like, whatever. People have been living in places like that. People live in the North Pole. Or the Arctic Circle, excuse me.
Real talk, I was preparing for a garden walk, and I had cucumbers, had them in regular white vinegar, took them out, and then had the seasoning that I put on it and just ate them that way. And I said, gosh, I want to be able to eat fresh cucumbers all the time. Now, and Chicago doesn't allow you. Fresh cucumbers from my garden doesn't allow you. But the real question is, what place can you really grow cucumbers all year long? And that kind of takes us back to preserving food. For me also reminds me of everything isn't meant to grow all the time. Right, so
which means we're not supposed to eat things all the time.
Well, I think maybe we cheat the system when we preserve that thing, and we're now allowed to eat it out of season, right? So that's actually a good question. So the things that you preserve, I know that you guys are really big on seasonal eating. Do you eat tomato sauce in January?
If we can,
okay.
But we don't buy tomatoes at the grocery store in January. We don't buy, strawberries in January. We don't buy apples right now. David was asking for an apple the other day, and I said, son, no. You can have a peach, you can have a plum. And those are your options right now because that's what it is. He's like, okay. It's one of those things too where, food coming from Chile to North America is an incredible amount of fossil fuels used. And if everybody's worried about global warming that's going on right now, that's how you can help with that is not participate into that, Now, do I think that the Backyard Gardens podcast or Backyard Gardens TV in general is going to stop food transportation? Hell no. You know what I mean? If Kelly comes in today and she's like, I want to make an apple pie and apples aren't in season, go for it. You know what I mean? But generally speaking, we practice seasonal eating all the time. Yeah. And there's actually, surprisingly, I've mentioned it on the show before, and I've had a lot of people reach out to me. They do the same. Yeah. So, and I also had people that are like me, pescatarian or vegan, but they will eat it if they kill it type deal. I've had a lot of people reach out about that as well. So shout out to you because I'm going to go ahead and tell you I got a deer that I've been watching, and Papa Bear is going after him this fall. So
I'm going to transition just a little bit. And I was talking about this recently with some girlfriends under a different kind of discussion umbrella, but the concept is the same. My grandmother used to tell me, most times we'd be on the phone. You okay there?
Yeah, I'm good.
Need some veggies from the garden, kind of balance things out. Yeah. So my grandmother used to tell me, probably mostly on the phone, slow down, girl, you're moving too fast. I'd be telling her about something, like I locked myself out of the house again, and slow down, girl, you're moving too fast. And I'm like, what, mama? I used to call her mama. And she's like, take your time. Like, what are you in such a rush for? Right. And so a part of gardening and preserving in particular, and mostly canning, it teaches you a level of patience, right? It slows down things. I can go to the grocery store, pick up the food, bring it back home and cook it faster than I can insert, this particular vegetable. Right. But that's not the point. It isn't about what I can get done in the microseconds, what I can get done immediately. It's not about the fast food, right? It's about taking pride and ownership of something that you're consuming. And so that's another opportunity where I can look back and say, it allows me to slow down a bit. Right. It allows me to have a level of appreciation, preserving food, that is, a level of appreciation for what I do in the garden, what nature does. Right. And that shows itself in a lot of different ways, but it absolutely, for me, shows itself in preserving.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll add one to it. It helps you manage disappointment. So, last year when I got I think it was like 26 or 27 butternut squash, I canned it. And I'm going to go ahead and say, well, first of all, you can't buy canned butternut squash at the store. So we have that. Yeah, hey. And I had to put it in a pressure canner for 45 minutes and watch it for 45 minutes and manage the pressure in it. Now, you want to talk about patience. My ass was done. Not to mention the fact that afterwards I'm looking at the jars in the cabinets and I was like, it sure is getting dark. The tops didn't seal on some of them. So then I had to throw out some of them, so it's like all of these different things. And, I think one life skill leads into another life skill, which leads into another one, because, we need to learn how to be patient. We need to learn how to be, disappointment. And life is fast right now, I mean, dude, you wanted to watch a movie back in the day, you got in a car, you drove to, I'm going to say it, Blockbuster, and you got a movie and you had to rewind it and fast forward it. And now it's like Netflix takes like 5 minutes or like 5 seconds. And you're like, what the hell? You know what I mean? Like, it's just we're trained. Everything's got to be faster. So
the amount of times that something happens, I was at the grocery store, I don't know, this is like last week, and I had my back turned to the parking lot, to like one of the attendants that was collecting the carts and another shopper that was coming. And I heard kind of like something crash, and he said something, and I turned around, because it's human, and I was trying to figure out what went on. And I'm not in those scenarios going to ask like, hey, what happened? I believe that the woman basically ran into another car with her cart, right? And kept on moving. Like, I think that's what he was trying to tell her. But the point of that story is there was a moment where I literally was like, I had my phone, like I was going to rewind that moment. Like I was going to look at the cameras of the grocery store, right? Like it was that weird thing of you have so much technology, so much access. If I hear something outside, I have access to see of my home, I have access to see what that thing was, right? And so I think that when we talk about gardening and preserving, it takes us back to a place where, again, you're able to slow down a bit and you're able to appreciate things in that moment, right? And in some cases, that moment passes. I think that for the garden in particular, I want to go back to the idea of disappointment. And it's such a great example. The butternut squash is such a great example. But I think another example that I've really been thinking about lately has been pests. Right. Yeah. And the damage that they can cause, pests, critters, and so on. You plant a thing and you expect to get food from that thing, and it doesn't happen that way. And I think that while there's always that disappointment, right? And I may say it 1 or 2 or 3 times about that same plant that didn't make it. But the reality is, obviously, there's a lesson to be learned there. But it also pauses you and says, everything you do won't be successful, period. Right? That's
right.
Life, right? You know,
you're gonna fail sometimes.
Yeah, everything that you want won't work out the way in which you want it to work out. So luckily so far I've not had discolored jars, you know, but I've definitely had some, oh, that was way in the back of the freezer, and that's freezer burned, you know, and it's like,
yeah,
you know,
same thing.
Yeah, I've wasted it, you know. But I'd rather waste the thing I pulled out of my garden than the bag I paid, the okra that I paid $3 for, the bag, you know, that's been in the back of the freezer.
Yeah, you know, we were talking the other day about making videos and stuff like that, and how this niche is different because if you factor in all of the time we spend on our gardens just to make the videos and stuff for people to consume and even run this podcast, the cost is astronomical. You know what I mean? So like that $3 bag of okra, screw, I'd rather that $3 bag of okra go than something I grew and worked really hard for. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I think I just have a different view on it than that, but I definitely hear what you're saying. But don't you feel like when it comes to all that we put into our gardens, all that we put into, you know, social media, to this podcast, there is also a value that comes from that, you know? And if we really were to break it down, it's a monetary value, just like our time we put into it, we get something out of it, you know? And there's a value associated with the lesson, right? When it came to that butternut squash, you probably can go back and say, oh, you know, I did go to the bathroom. I did help David with his homework and I wasn't monitoring the pressure, you know.
Yeah.
It allows me to be more organized when I think about, like, how are you losing food? And not even a deep freezer. We're talking about the freezer that, you know, has the refrigerator freezer combo. Like, come on now. Let's be proud of what we do, and it's valuable, right? Let's just not be all cavalier about, I'm just going to toss this in the back of the freezer. Or let's consider, maybe you're growing too much okra, girl. Maybe.
Well, okra produces a lot, so you know, it's one of those things too that when I think about it, you know, growing too much is an issue, and as much as I like to give food away, though, I like to keep food for myself.
Yeah.
And I want to keep as much as I can in the house because I put a lot of effort into it. Yeah. You know, and I mean, going back to like, why do we do this? I can tell you exactly why. Because last year I was in communication with somebody in the beginning of the pandemic, wanted to start a garden. And I think her name's on Instagram is Wildcrafter. I'm just going to go ahead and say it, whatever. And she grew a couple plants. And then I didn't talk to her for a while, you know, months and months and months. And then I scroll and I find a picture, and she's got 8 tomato plants or something like that. They're full of red cherry tomatoes. She's got a zucchini growing, you know, and dude, she made it happen. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's why you do this, is because like I was able to help her get started and get going. And now I know that like she's on her way of being a gardener. Yeah. And she loves it, you know, and not to mention that, but like they don't look like gardeners. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we got that thing the other day about the seed saving conference. Did you look at all the speakers?
I scanned through it.
If you look at all the speakers' pictures, they all look about the same.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
You know what I mean? Just like real homely, like normal, plain clothes. You know what I mean? And like, there's people that garden that don't fit that mold. Yeah. That are really good gardeners. Yeah. And, you know, that's what I love. You know, look at Ron Finley, you know, he doesn't look like a gardener. Yeah. But I'll be damned if he ain't one of the best out there, you know, he's got it going on.
So this is 2 years ago now. So this is definitely pre-pandemic. Man, the rain that we're getting here, like okay, I'm not going to go off on that tangent. I was meeting some girlfriends, and we were doing this like once a week. It only lasted a couple of months, but it was a great time. Another friend was growing, like, you know, throwing an after work set. I don't know if you know what that is. It's kind of like, all right, it's like a mixer of sorts, right? You go to a bar, restaurant. This was at like, I don't know, like the Hilton Hotel in Chicago. And
you have to remember, I don't drink, so I'm not hip.
But
to
I
that.
mean, there's all kinds of water and sodas and live music.
There we go.
All right, I know, soda terrible. But anyway, so the point was, I was dressed. This was like a daytime thing. You're going to be there for a few hours, right? And so I rolled up as cute as Summer Batavia is, because she can get real cute. Heels, a dress, a little bit more.
We're witnessing that today.
Yeah, a little bit more makeup. And I popped open my trunk, and my trunk had vegetables in it because I was giving vegetables to a couple of my girlfriends that I was meeting there. So you talk about like, you don't fit the bill. It's funny to me because you look and say, all right, now we can put on some nice clothes. Like, this isn't all of our life, but it's a critical part of our life, right?
Yeah.
And that's the piece. It's a diverse lifestyle too. All right now. Okay, here we go.
Here we go.
Diverse skills and abilities.
Damn, I hear you. And I don't know why we didn't get a bell ring.
I was so pleased with
You missed
myself.
it.
I was just thinking about
You missed it. There we go. Leonard was like sweating over here. He was like, hit it. I mean, it is, and coming back to preserving, and I think we may have gone way off the subject, but that's okay. That's kind of what we're all about. But coming back to preserving, it's just extending all of these feelings that we've talked about into the months when you can't get out in your garden and work. So I can grow in the wintertime, but it's hard. And it's heartbreaking at times, and it's patience to the max. And there is a period of time where if you don't do it right, you ain't going to eat. So I still have that same feeling. And from what I understand, the people in the higher zones have the same issues. There's a period of time where it's like they can't grow certain things and stuff. So it's not just like anywhere you go, you can just all year round.
Exactly.
So, I mean, they might have in the summertime they can't grow.
Yeah.
How weird would that be?
One of the things that gardeners do is adapt.
Yep.
So...
yeah, gardeners, you guys are like, damn it, just something special.
Rock star, baby. Hold on.
You adapt, you're diverse, and you are patient and kind, most of you. And no. And I mean, it does say a lot about you, though. And it's like everybody that I've known that has gardened, though, they all have those same qualities at times. And at times they don't. And we are all problem solvers. That's what we are. You make problem solving your number one this time of year. So
Absolutely.
And don't preserve anything that's been chewed on by pests. Okay. Okay. Let me just go ahead and on the record, a little PSA after school special. Don't do that.
Absolutely.
So that's not good.
You want to preserve in all forms the freshest, healthiest versions of vegetables that you have. I definitely will cut the top off of a tomato if it's cracked. Maybe even a little bit nibbled on and eat it fresh, but I shall not preserve that thing.
No. And really it's when it's split mostly. Those little dry cracks, that's not a big deal. But you get a little soft spot on it.
Yeah.
Because,
Bacteria,
you
baby.
can it with bacteria, you get more bacteria. It's just going to brew and brew and brew. So, look, we have talked about canning, so I'm hoping Batavia is going to give us a canning recipe, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
Well, let's see.
As she rolls her eyes, we'll be right back with the recipe of the day.
Okie doke. So, because my hand was forced and I felt like I'd be letting you all down if I did not, we are going to do a preserving recipe. And because everything is in my phone as a note, I have it handy. This is fire roasted pickled sweet red peppers. Baby! Guess what's going to make one of my lunch meals in those 31 days?
You ain't lying, me too.
All right, so I'm reading this out of, I'm pretty sure it's one of the Ball canning books. But it includes the following ingredients: 6 to 8 small sweet red peppers, The reality is you can use any color pepper you want. You're going to use 1 large clove of garlic. You're going to use a half a cup of dry white wine. You can likely omit this, although you don't want to tinker too much with some of these recipes. But if that's a thing for you, you can omit it. We're going to do a half a cup of white vinegar, a fourth a cup of cider vinegar. We're going to do a half a cup of coarsely chopped onion. Oh, I hope you grew those. We're rounding out the ingredients with 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar. We're going to do a half a tablespoon of dried oregano and 1 teaspoon of pickling salt. That's going to be important. So you're going to roast the peppers. You know I'm all about the grill. You can roast them in the oven, or you can roast them on the grill. You just want to make sure that there's some charring that happens, right? So once the skins of those peppers kind of blister, it's still going to have kind of the smokiness that happens when you roast. You're going to actually peel some of that blistered skin off of those peppers. An easy way to do this is you can put the peppers into a paper bag or a bowl and cover it with cling wrap. That steam will make it easier for you to peel. You're going to place and I'm not going to give the canning specific instructions, but you're going to combine all of your wines, vinegars, onions, sugar, oregano. So this is going to be kind of your liquid for the canning process. You're going to actually squeeze the roasted garlic because you want some on your fingers so you can fight vampires. So you're going to squeeze the roasted garlic to get that flavoring into that mixture. You're going to, this is a water bath canning recipe, by the way. Bring the mixture that we just talked about on top of the stove to a boil. And we're going to reduce the heat and boil it for about 5 minutes. All right, let's see what else we have. All right, next part is loading all of this into your jars, and then you're going to water bath can. And this is, let's see, I think it's 15 minutes is what we're doing, and we're making 4 1-cup jars, so it's 8 ounces. This is actually from the Small Preserving book. When this episode airs, I'm going to put a picture of the book that we have on Backyard Gardens TV, Instagram. Check the stories for the day this episode airs, so you'll see where I got this recipe from. I love this book now that I look at the bottom of the size of this, because it allows you to easily, as a new person canning, to can, just a couple of jars of something versus like needing to can 28 jars or needing to have 100 pounds of a thing.
Let's add that book to the Amazon list.
Excellent.
So go check that, because that will help you.
Yeah, disregard.
This is easier.
Don't ever check Backyard Gardens TV stories. There will be nothing there that's going to help you with canning. Instead, check the notes.
Except for all of your pictures.
Check the show notes for this one. Great call out.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to interrupt
That's
you.
Okay. So my last note, so how I eat this, I actually put this, like the peppers, and I didn't tell you how to cut them, but, I would either cut them in fourths, removing all of the insides, obviously, or just cut them in halves if you're using something like a bell pepper. But it works great on any sandwich, cold or hot. I've added them in the winter to salads because it replaces the idea in my mind of a fresh tomato. It kind of has that texture. It definitely is full of flavor. It is one of the reasons why you see so many peppers in my garden this year. There are a lot of things I want to do with preserving and specifically peppers. And it's a recipe like this that I'm looking forward to making. I think I only did like 2 or 3 jars, and I was disappointed that I only had 2 or 3 jars last year. So we're going to try to amp it up.
So I want to make another kind of not suggestion. I want to tell you guys, if you're going to can pickles, you should be canning pickling pickles or cucumbers, and get them when they're a little young. Don't get them too ripe because they get mushy and gross. So just remember that,
That's the reason why I'm eating the National Pickling cucumbers fresh.
Do you like those? I don't like the way they grow.
I don't like the way they grow either. This is the 2nd or 3rd year I've grown them, but I don't feel like I've really gotten them at the size that's recommended, to your point. Right? So they're definitely more prickly than any cucumber that I normally grow. And they are slower to get from like small ideal size to huge. So there is that. That's a positive. But I also...
Well, they're They're not supposed to get big.
No, I already have. I mean, let's see. I'm trying to think of the size. So if they're probably about, ideally, maybe 4 or 5 inches is probably what the package says.
4 or 5 inch. Yeah.
If I let it get 6 inches and then maybe 3 or 4 inches around, I already have plenty of seeds inside of it. It's still completely edible fresh, but I'm not going to can that, you know.
I'm going to post a picture of one coming up that I let go to seed, and you would not eat this one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's rough. But yeah, I usually do Boston pickling. But I wanted an heirloom one. This is the second year I've grown them, and they seem very susceptible to disease and pests. So I need to reevaluate that situation. Yeah. But since this is a canning episode, a preserving episode, I'm gonna give a recipe too.
Ooh, bring it.
Knock off Claussen pickles in time this year. Okay. 35 to 40 cucumbers, 1 gallon of cold water, 1 cup of cider vinegar, 2 teaspoons of pickling spice, 2/3 of a cup of canning salt, 4 cloves of garlic, and 4 tablespoons of dill seeds and dill heads. And you can can it. We let it ferment on the counter for 3 or 4 days. Every day you take the top off, scoop the gunk off, and then you can it in the water bath. So...
Okay.
I did it early this year. I know I bullshitted last year, so there you go.
Yeah.
And I'll put it on. I'm going to actually start putting canning recipes on Instagram so people can get those and stuff like that. So
I may join you in that. We'll see.
Yeah.
But that's actually...
We'll talk after this because I have an idea.
Yeah, your timing on that works really, really, really well. And I do want to go back and circle back to the idea of you don't need a U-Haul truck of any vegetable to preserve. Right.
No. If you don't have 35 to 40 cucumbers, you can just cut it in half and then cut everything in half. You know, you can cut it in quarters, whatever. It is definitely easier and less time consuming if you do it all at once. Yeah. So, but not everybody has 35 cucumbers. Hell, I don't even get 35 cucumbers at once. Yeah. So whatever, you know what I mean? Like we generally are like, my wife's so funny. She'll be in there and she'll be like, her fingers will be going and she'll be looking in the sky. And then her lips start to stick out a little bit, and she's like, and then she kind of scrunches up. I'm like, what you trying to figure out? And she's like, oh, I got a quarter of the recipe. I'm like, oh, okay. So, but yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I know we were kind of all over the place. You know, preserving is something that we are both very passionate about. And I think what you're going to see moving forward is these passions be highlighted more and more. Because it's just part of who we are and what we do. And I think that's where we want to kind of take things, not solely, but we definitely want to lean heavily into these things because that's what we find important. And we hear you guys and we see the interest. So, you know, if you guys have any good canning recipes, like reach out to us to let us know. I love sharing canning recipes because I'm always looking for a new jam recipe. I'm always looking for a new pickle recipe. Actually, as a matter of fact, right now I'm looking for a sweet pickle recipe. So,
okay.
Yep, we're actually talking about only doing like 2 jars of the Claussen this year, and then doing other flavors, which is new for us. So, but yeah, so reach out to us, let us know, send us a picture of your garden to Backyard Gardens TV, and we will share it with all of our listeners. You guys have amazing gardens, by the way. So, send them on, you know what I mean? And we'll put them in the rotation. If they don't get shared right away, it's because we got a backlog, but we're getting through them. Tag us, BYG Podcast. We'll put it in the stories. We like seeing everything in your garden. We want to see your happy faces in the garden too. Damn it, I ain't gotten a single picture of anybody. I want to see your face smiling in your garden right now. So go outside, step into your garden, turn your little phone around and stare right down the barrel of that camera and snap a picture and tag us BYG Podcast. We'd love to hear it. I hope you love canning. I hope you love gardening. And until next time,
see ya.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you want to see what we're up to or just stay up to date on all the announcements regarding the show or anything gardening, then you can follow us on Instagram at Backyard Gardens TV.
We love seeing what you guys are doing, so use hashtag BYG Podcast in your posts, and we'll be sharing your gardens with the Backyard Gardens community.
And check us out on YouTube at Backyard Gardens, where we will post this show, all of our other shows, clips, and then also some gardening tips and just gardening entertainment. And you can see us at our website at backyardgardenstv.com. But that's it for today's show. So help us as we learn to grow and grow for change. And until next time, we'll catch you guys later. We'll call this one a wrap.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.